Yeah, so Exodus chapter 24, starting at verse 1, which is on page 88 in the Church Bibles. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Come up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel. You are to worship at a distance, but Moses alone is to approach the Lord. The others must not come near, and the people may not come up with him." When Moses went and told the people all the Lord's words and laws, they responded with one voice, "Everything the Lord has said, we will do." Moses then wrote down everything the Lord had said. He got up early the next morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain and set up 12 stone pillars representing the 12 tribes of Israel. Then he sent young Israelite men, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed young bulls as fellowship offerings to the Lord. Moses took half of the blood and put it in bowls, and the other half he splashed against the altar. Then he took the book of the covenant and read it to the people. They responded, "We will do everything the Lord has said. We will obey." Moses then took the blood, sprinkled it on the people, and said, "This is the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words." Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel went up and saw the God of Israel. Under his feet was something like a pavement made of lapis lazuli, as bright blue as the sky. But God did not raise his hand against the leaders of the Israelites. They saw God, and they ate and drank. The Lord said to Moses, "Come up to me on the mountain and stay here, and I will give you the tablets of stone with the laws and commandments I have written for their instruction." Then Moses set out with Joshua his assistant, and Moses went up on the mountain of God. He said to the elders, "Wait here for us until we come back to you. Aaron and Hur are with you, and anyone involved in a dispute can go to them." When Moses went up on the mountain, the cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord settled on Mount Sinai. For 6 days the cloud covered the mountain, and on the 7th day the Lord called to Moses from within the cloud. To the Israelites, the glory of the Lord looked like a consuming fire on top of the mountain. Then Moses entered the cloud as he went up on the mountain, and he stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights.
Pretend like you didn't know anything, like the information.
Well, I think most people dropping off next door have come back through. So let me get going. Let me add my welcome to Gareth. My name is Peter Walkinshaw. I'm the pastor here at the church. And if you've not met, I'd love to say hello as we enjoy a cuppa together just after the formal time of our gathering is over. You join us if you are a visitor, or of course if you're normally here, as we start a new series. Gareth's already alluded to this. Now you can pick up one of these. It's a term card. It tells you what we're planning, or some of the things that we're planning this term here at church, just on the windowsill over there. But if you did do that, you would see that for the rest of October and then the first 3 weeks in November, on Sunday mornings, we're planning to look at the book of Exodus. Now, as Gareth mentioned, we're coming back to Exodus because we did look at earlier chapters of Exodus quite a few years ago now. Then we looked more in depth at the Ten Commandments. They come in Exodus chapter 20. And we're carrying on now from chapter 24 right through to the end. Now, there's quite a lot going on here, and there's quite a lot of detail in the second half of Exodus. And we're going to slow down and look more in depth at some bits, and we're going to speed up and cover some bits a little bit more quickly. So some of the sections, there's quite a few chapters that we're covering. We won't be reading all of that on Sunday morning. So if you want to fully get your head around what's going on, pick up one of these or check out the church website and you could read it before you come. You don't have to, it's optional. It's like extra fun take-home activity for you. But we are this morning getting into chapter 24. So as you can see on the screen, it's page 88, and we're going to dive into that. So let me just pray just before we do that. Father, we thank you that you have preserved these words for us from so long ago. Words that are way over 3,000 years old. Father, they seem slightly obscure to us perhaps, but Father, I pray you'd speak to us through what's going on here. You'd help us to see not just what was happening then, but why it's relevant for us in Carlisle in 2025. And I pray that you'd help us to do that now. Amen. I wonder if you've ever been up to Hedron's Wall, not too far. I love going to Hedron's Wall and have a little walk along the wall or wherever, just to my wife's sort of frustration, because she'd rather be by a lake. But I mean, there are some sort of ponds up there. But one of the places you can visit is Vindolanda. So it's a former Roman fort. Up on the wall. Actually, a number of forts were built on the same site. If you go, you discover there's about 5 different ones on top of each other. And when you arrive, it's pretty pricey, by the way. But other bits of Hedron's Wall are free. You can just go and see them. But if you go there, you've got to pay to get in. But as you arrive, there's a place where you pay. And then one of the first things you get to is this, which is a model of what it would have looked like at one point, or what they think it would have looked like. And you can see the rectangular shape of the Roman fort, and then outside the sort of village that would spring up next to it. And this model is amazing. I mean, my 10-year-old self would have had his mind blown to think that it's somebody's job to make things like that, because I would have loved helping with something like that when I was 10. But there's tremendous detail, absolutely fantastic thing, and I can spend ages looking at that. It's absolutely tremendous. So there's a little advert for Vindolanda. You want to go? Right, just park that away in your brain, because we're coming back to that later. But now we're going to get into Exodus 25. So you think, oh, that was a bit odd, Peter. What was that? But we'll come back to it, and it'll be relevant. Okay, we're page 88, and it will be useful to have that open in front of you, because we are going to be looking at some individual verses here in this chapter. Now, here's what you need to know. What's been happening in the first bit of Exodus? So what has been happening is God has rescued his people from Egypt, where they were slaves. The word Exodus means coming out. It's linked to our word exit. And God's brought the people out of Egypt. They couldn't do it themselves. They were slaves to the Egyptians, but he's rescued them. Lots of miraculous and weird things have gone on to enable that to happen. They're now out in the desert area that we call Sinai. They're near a mountain called Sinai. And there, God has given them the 10 Commandments. And as I said, that happened in chapter 20. And there's been a bit more further explanation in the next few chapters. Moses has been up the mountain while the people are camped out at the bottom. And as 24 opens, he's still up the mountain. He's been there since chapter 20, poor guy. But he's still at the mountain. The first 2 verses of this chapter really are finishing off what was going on in 23, because God's been speaking to Moses in chapter 23, and that continues as our chapter opens. And God gives us some instructions about gathering together some folk to bring. He says you're to worship at a distance, verse 2. Moses alone can approach the Lord. The others mustn't come too near. The people have to stay at the bottom of the mountain. So there's all of the people at the bottom of the mountain. A few people can come part way, and only Moses can go right to the top. So God tells Moses that's the plan. And we read, and you can read it in verse 9, that Moses then follows that instruction. He organises, gets these 70 elders and a few of the guys, and they do what God has said. Now I've got 2 things I particularly want us to notice from what's going on in this chapter. Not three. Some people will nearly fall off their seat. But I've got two things, and they're on the screen. The first is that we're going to see this covenant. That just means an agreement or a really solemn promise. The covenant brings friendship with God. So there's a covenant happening here. We'll hear a bit more about that in a minute. And then the second thing is the covenant brings blessing. So they're pretty easy things, aren't they? But the first of those, covenant brings friendship with God. Now, in verse 3, we read that Moses tells the people everything that he's learned. He gives them all the Lord's words and laws. So the Ten Commandments and the other things that come just after chapter 20, 21, 22, 23. All the stuff that God's been telling him, he explains all that to the people. And they respond. Have a look at verse 3. They respond with one voice. So together they respond, everything the Lord has said, we will do. Everything the Lord has said, we will do. And then Moses writes it all down. Verse 4 actually tells us about part of the Bible being written, because Moses is writing this stuff down, and that's partly what's in the Old Testament for us now. So there's a little insight. The Bible telling us about the Bible being written. Anyway, but next morning, the second part of verse 4 tells us next morning it's a big day for everyone, because they're going to formalise this covenant, this agreement, this promise that's between God and the people. It's really important in the book of Exodus to see the order of what is happening. Because the order of what is happening is that God has already rescued them from Egypt. They're not in Egypt still, they're out of Egypt. He has rescued them, and now he's saying, if you want to be my people, I will give you my laws and how you need to live. And if you want, you can we can enter into this agreement, you can be my people. Now, why I'm saying the order is important, he's not saying, here's a bunch of laws and rules, if you can keep these, then I realise you'll be worthy to be rescued from Egypt. It's not that way around. He's taken the initiative, he's rescued them, and then he's saying, if you want to be my people, I will be your God, you can be my people, and here's what that means. Here's what that looks like. Here's how you need to live. And that's why they've not got just the Ten Commandments, I think, but they've also got further explanation in those chapters, chapter 21, 22, 23. So in some ways it's like the small print being explained. Then what happens, what's happened, is in verse 4, Moses builds an altar to God. So he sets up this altar. It's got 12 stones that represent the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 groups of people that are there. And in verse 5, we find out some young men are involved and some bulls get sacrificed. Probably the young men and the bulls are all firstborn sons. Bulls aren't really sons, are they? Well, I suppose in a way are. But anyway, but probably there's some significance there. It doesn't mention that. But some people are chosen anyway to do this, and blood from these animals is collected. Now, this all seems to us the weirdest thing and quite barbaric in a way, doesn't it? But we find out in verse 7 that they've saved some of, verse 6, sorry, they've saved some of the blood and some is splashed on the altar. And then in verse 7, Moses reads the book of the covenant to the people, and they again say, we will do everything the Lord has said. We will obey. We will obey. Now, he reads this all out to them. They just had it yesterday as well. They've just had it yesterday. So he really wants them to understand what's going on here. It's a bit like they've had a cooling off period, like you might have in a financial agreement in the UK or something. They know exactly what they're getting into, and they say, we will do everything the Lord has said, we will obey. Earlier they said this will also apply to our descendants as well. And This agreement, this covenant, is really the only way that people, because of our sin and our rejection of God, can have peace or fellowship or friendship with God. Because what's happened here is God has taken the initiative. He's taken the initiative in rescuing them. He's taken the initiative in explaining how things are going to operate and how they can come to him on his terms. So he's shown grace to them by rescuing them, and this is their response to that. So they haven't just come up with some ideas that might help them to be friends with God. God's taken the initiative. And then here's perhaps the weirdest bit of the whole thing, where in verse 8, Moses sprinkles blood on the people. Imagine that. You've just seen these bulls being killed, blood being collected, half of it being splashed on this altar, and now the other half is going around splashing it on everyone. My goodness me, we don't have great washing facilities out here in the desert, Moses. What's going on? But here's what verse 8 says, which explains to us what's going on. It says, "This is the blood of the covenant that the Lord made with you in accordance with all these words." So why the sprinkling? Well, it's a sign. Half of it has gone on the altar. That's symbolizing God's side of the agreement, so to speak. And half of it's on the people. It's a big visual aid to them of what's going on and of the two-sided nature of this agreement. God has done all the work, really. He's done the rescue. They simply have to respond to the grace that they've been shown by obeying what he's telling them about how we should live. Now you might think, why does it need to be this extreme with blood and bulls and all this kind of thing? Well, there's a few reasons, I think. One, you wouldn't forget it, would you? I mean, you wouldn't forget that day. You're coming away covered in bull's blood. You would really remember. You would really remember. It's a bit like if you're married and someone says, you're married. You're at a wedding. You remember, don't you? But also, it's helping the people think back to the rescue from Egypt, because you might know, if you know that story, that there was blood involved in that as well. A Passover lamb had to die, and blood was painted on a doorpost back in Egypt. It came at a cost. Reminds us a little bit of the cost of what's gone on here. But also that God has done that. It's linking them back to when he rescued them from Egypt. And that a price has been paid for this friendship, this peace with God, this fellowship with him. There's some cost to it. Now they don't fully maybe understand that, and you might say, well, the cost's all on the bulls, really. But actually, God has been at work to rescue them, and all of that is going to become more significant later on. So, all of that is then showing them and us that there's a covenant now being made. It's sort of been formalised through this ceremony, and they now have friendship, fellowship, peace with God. They are his family. And that enables access to God, and we go on to see that there's access for God, to God. Now we've already heard that the people are at the bottom of the mountain. Some people are partway up the mountain. Moses is going to be allowed to go all the way up the mountain. But let's have a look at verse 9, where it says, Moses, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and the 70 elders went up. They saw the God of Israel. Under his feet was something like a pavement made of lapis lazuli, as bright blue as the sky. But God did not raise his hand against these leaders of the Israelites. They saw God, and they ate and drank Now, this is remarkable, and why it's remarkable is because of what something elsewhere in the Bible, actually elsewhere in this book, tells us. So in Exodus 33, which I think we've got on the screen, Exodus 33 says this, God speaking, said, "You cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live," says God. "No one can see me and live." Then the Lord said, "There is a place near me where you may stand on a rock. When my glory passes by, I will put you in the cleft of the rock and cover you with my hand until I pass. Then I will remove my hand, you will see my back, but my face must not be seen." So this is God speaking to Moses a little bit later. No one can see God and live. It's pretty clear there in verse 20, isn't it? But here, verse 11, God did not raise his hand against these leaders of the Israelites. They saw God. They saw God. So you think, oh, hold on, bit of a contradiction there. What's going on? You can't see God and live, but here they do. Well, you can't ordinarily see God unless he makes some arrangement. So here, in Exodus 33, he's making an arrangement where he's going to pass by Moses. Moses will be able to see him from the back. Here, God seems sort of far off above them, perhaps. There's something like a pavement under his feet, made of this semi-precious stone, which I think we've got. I think the next slide will give us a picture of this. This is from Etsy, where you can buy some of this stuff for 1984, great year, but for £19.84 plus quite a lot of postage, you can buy this semi-precious stone. Now look how blue it is. I mean, it almost looks like Earth, doesn't it? There, sort of the blue planet. This amazing blue colour. Now, because I've been doing a bit of research in this week, there's a few places in the world that you can mine this stuff. One's in South America. But at this point, in Bible times and in Roman times a bit later, the only place on the whole earth that anyone had found this, and you could get it from, was in northeast Afghanistan. So it's been dug out the ground there, and it's been found in Egypt, in Rome, in ancient Greece, all over the place. There's a bit of a trade with it coming around the place, and people, it seems like, knew what that was because they're using that to describe the colour. So there's this absolutely vivid blue-coloured pavement of some sort. It says bright blue as the sky, it actually says. And it's under his feet somehow. Now it's not, it doesn't look translucent there. Maybe if you get it really thin, it goes slightly translucent. I don't know. But there's another description of somebody seeing God in Ezekiel, which I think we might have on the next slide. Thank you. Here's Ezekiel 1. It said, spread out over the, this is Ezekiel looking, spread out over the heads of the living creatures was what looked like something like a vault, like a ceiling or something, sparkling like crystal and awesome. Above the vault, over their heads, was what looked like a throne made of the same stuff, this blue stuff. And high above, on the throne, was a figure like that of a man. So he's seeing, in Ezekiel 1, he's seeing God. But there's some sort of hazy crystal barrier of some sort that he's seeing. There's this blue, which is a throne. Could the bottom of that look like a pavement? I don't know. But he can't see clearly, but he can see something. You get the idea. What do they actually see here? We're back in Exodus. We're not sure. But I saw this picture this week. I think we've got a picture here. So Lucy and I were at a funeral this week, and there was a talk at the funeral that was all about the bit in the gospel where Jesus is walking on the Sea of Galilee. Peter's walking towards him, but then takes his eyes off Jesus, starts to drown, and Jesus grabs onto him and pulls him to safety. And they had this picture. It was actually on the order of service for the funeral, which somebody's painted. You can see some feet at the bottom there, and this is kind of the Peter's eye view. Peter was wearing a GoPro or something. looking up at Jesus rescuing him, the hand coming through the water. Now, is this what they saw in Exodus 24? I don't know. But they see something that is blue. They in some way see God. They're not killed. It specifically mentions that in verse 11, God did not raise his hand against them, meaning, he hasn't taken action. We know from elsewhere in Exodus, you can't just wander in and see God. So it's helping us to see it's got to be on his terms. It's got to be on his terms. He might allow, in certain circumstances, things to be revealed to people or whatever, but it's on his terms. And what do they do? I mean, if you've been there, you think, what would you do? What do? They have a picnic. Look at the end of verse 11. They ate and drank. They're, I don't know if I'd be feeling peckish at that point, but, they're breaking out the Pringles or whatever, and they're eating together. Maybe some of the meat from the offerings earlier, I don't know if that was totally burned up or what they're eating, but they're having a meal right there. In God's presence, so to speak. The meal, the significance of the meal, I think, is it's helping confirm the fellowship, the friendship with God. When people eat together, that's something that friends do, not always friends, could be work colleagues or whatever, but it is a sign of being together. If you've fallen out with somebody, or if people have fallen out at work, they might not eat on the same table. Somebody might take their package, the sandwiches or whatever, go and eat on a different table because they're not friends. But friends eat together, don't they? These folk, the 70 elders, Moses, the others, have a new standing with God, a friendship or fellowship with God. They're not killed. This covenant brings access, friendship, fellowship. Well, that's the first thing I want us to see about this. The second thing is that the covenant brings blessing. The covenant brings blessing. They get given the law. The Lord said, verse 12, the Lord said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain, stay there. I'll give you the tablets of stone with the law and the commandments I've written for their instruction. So Moses already explained it all to them, but they're now going to get the hard copy, if you like, the stone. Literally a hard copy, isn't it? A stone. And it seems to be that the others, either they go back down or they wait part way, and Moses goes on further, and is receiving the law. Now, it's worth remembering that in the Bible, when God gives his law, it's a blessing. So often we think of law as a hard thing, something that is imposing lots of rules and a burden to people. But God's law is meant to be a blessing. It is a blessing that God says people shouldn't lie to you. It is a blessing that God says someone shouldn't come in your house and pinch your stuff. It's a blessing that God says you should be able to walk down the street without somebody killing you. It's a blessing. It's supposed to be a blessing. And he's going to give them this summary of the law, these 10 commandments, on stone tablets. Now Moses is going to be up there 40 days, verse 18 tells us. And he's going to be with God. The others are waiting. He's sort of gone from their sight. He's in a cloud. It seems to them like there's some sort of fire up there or whatever. And the blessing is something not just for them, but it's going to be a blessing for them in the future. It's going to be something that really shapes and defines how they should live with one another and how they should interact with God. Now, here's a quick quiz to see who remembers the 1990s. So, immediately that rules out some people. But I wonder if you remember, if you were around in the 1990s, if you can finish this advertising slogan. The future's bright, the future... Oh, that's giving it away, guys. The future's bright, the future's... Yes. It was a bit easier when you saw it on the screen. But the future's bright, the future's orange. So the phone company Orange had this slogan. It was a massive campaign. It went on for years, and they really hammered it home. Well, the future's bright for these guys, and the future's being God's people, being in friendship with God, having his framework for how to live with each other and with him. The future is looking bright. Friendship, fellowship, peace with God, access to God, his blessing, and a future with him. Now, so far so good. All, I was going to say very interesting. You might say moderately interesting, Peter. What's it got to do with us, really? What's it got to do with us? Now, do you remember my little advert for Hadrian's Wall and for Vindolanda and for the marvellous model that there is up there? It would be a shame if you went up to Vindolanda, you paid, 45 quid or whatever it is to get in. It's probably not that much, is it? But you sell a kidney or whatever to be able to get in. And you get into that first bit, and you see this marvellous model. You really enjoy it. You stay for a few hours, looking at all that incredible detail. Then you get back in your car on your bike and you go. And you don't actually leave that building and go to see the thing that the model is depicting. Because the ruins there are absolutely amazing. And you realise when you get outside how accurate the model is, because it's not like, we think it was maybe like this. Like the individual buildings in the model, the outline of them is right there. It's right there. The fort in its rectangle, the houses, etc. It's right there. Now, as Christian people, we can read this and think it's great or interesting or, well, they're getting blood chucked on them or whatever. But do you know what? This is just to help us understand something bigger. This is here to help us understand something bigger. This is the model, if you like, that helps us understand a later reality, something that we'll get to in a little while. The friendship, the fellowship with God is tremendous. But we have a better friendship with God. We have covenant blessings that are way beyond what they had even. I wonder if you noticed the little phrase that came in verse 8. Moses took the blood, sprinkled it on the people, and said, "This is the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you." This is the blood of the covenant. That phrase, blood of the covenant, comes 6 times in the New Testament. 6 times. And every time it's used about Jesus' death on the cross. So here's an example of that from Matthew 26 on the screen. "This is my blood of the covenant," says Jesus, "which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." Now he's saying that at the time of him instituting the communion meal, sharing bread and wine to remember his death. This is my blood of the covenant. So the ox blood was okay, but it wasn't a permanent solution. The ox blood enabled the covenant to be confirmed, enabled some access to God, but it wasn't a permanent solution. Lasting peace with God is only achieved through Jesus' death and his blood shed. So our friendship, our fellowship, our peace with God is far better than what they had in the Old Testament. But not only that, our access to God is better. The New Testament is clear that we have access to the Father through Jesus. Not just a one-off thing at a mountain, and certain people are allowed to go up a mountain or whatever. We have a meal together. At the Lord's Supper, we share bread and wine together, just a bit like they did in verse 11. And it reminds us of what God has done, and what Jesus has done, and it reminds us of the tremendous access that we have. Look at Hebrews 10 behind me. Let us draw near to God with sincere hearts, with the full assurance that faith brings. It's about access, isn't it, to God. So our covenant is better, a permanent solution because of Jesus' blood. Our access is better because of what that achieves. And even our blessing is better. They had the law, the Ten Commandments and the law that they're given. But we have God's law written on our hearts and His Spirit to help us to live it and do it. Here on the screen is how Ezekiel describes that in Ezekiel 36. Looking ahead to Jesus' day, it says, God's saying, I will sprinkle clean water on you, not blood. You will be clean. I will cleanse you from all your impurities and from your idols. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. If you're in a growth group, you might have recently looked at that verse in growth group. But God is saying there that a time is coming, and we live in that time, when because of what Jesus achieved on the cross, we haven't got some stone tablets that we look to, but God's actually planting His law in our hearts. He's helping us to live it and follow it. So, as our time has gone, let's appreciate the model that we've got here in Exodus. Let's appreciate what it's telling us and showing us. But let's not be standing in the foyer, in the entrance, enjoying the model when we could be enjoying the real thing. We might think, if only I could have seen God like this, if only I could have been at the mountain and seen the cloud and the fire and this blue and whatever's going on, whatever they saw, if only I could have seen. It'd be so much easier to believe if I had that. But I think the Bible says you don't need that. You don't need that. God's saying you don't need that. It's happened for some people, but most of us don't need that. We have Jesus who came. We have Jesus as our Lord and King. We have God taking the initiative to rescue us from sin and its consequences. And we can remember His death at the cross, not by sacrifices and bulls, but when we share bread and wine together. So, if we're a Christian, we can revel in that. We can enjoy that. We can enjoy that we have peace with God. We have fellowship, friendship with Him. We have heaven to look forward to. We have His framework for how to live. If you're not a Christian, perhaps this has been fascinating for you, perhaps intriguing. Let me encourage you to think about Christianity Explored if you want to think about these things a bit more.